If you can make him pass, I'll promote you. Those were the words that started it all. Jack Whitmore's voice was like ice smooth, but sharp enough to cut. He was one of the richest men in the country, used to bending reality with money and power, but he couldn't bend his 12-year-old son into being what he thought he should be. That night, he sat in his sleek study walls lined with books he hadn't read in years, staring at a crumpled report card full of red ink. Across the marble hall, his son Caleb sat hunched over his homework shoulders, slumped pencil scratching hopelessly. To the world, Caleb was a billionaire's heir. To himself, he was a failure in a house where failure wasn't tolerated. At the edge of the room, Maria the maid dusted the picture frames, careful to make herself invisible. She'd been working for the Whitmores for years, always in the background, scrubbing, tidying, serving meals nobody noticed she'd cooked. She'd seen Caleb's quiet frustration, the way his lips moved silently over words he couldn't quite read, the shame in his eyes when his father glanced at his grades. And she'd heard Jack's cold voice before, but this time it carried something final. You fail again, and you're done here. Caleb had flinched, like those words were a slap. Later that night, Maria found him in the kitchen, staring at his homework with glassy eyes. Without thinking, she spoke. I think I know why it feels so hard for you. Caleb looked up, startled, like no one had ever bothered to ask. When Jack walked in moments later, adjusting his cufflinks, irritation still simmering, Maria gathered every ounce of courage she had. Sir, if you let me try, I believe I can help him. Jack stopped in his tracks, his lips curling into a bitter laugh. You're a maid. I've paid experts, doctors, tutors. None of them could fix him. And you think you can? Maria didn't flinch. All I ask is a chance. Jack swirled the amber liquid in his glass, amused. Fine. If you can make him pass, I'll promote you. You'll never scrub these floors again. It was meant to be a joke. For Maria, it was a vow. The next morning, she didn't march in with thick textbooks or drills. She started small, a tattered children's book from her own kids' pages, worn soft from years of bedtime stories. Caleb frowned. That's baby stuff. Maria smiled, patient. Let's just read one line. No rush. He sighed, leaned forward, and tried. The letters danced, twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. Frustration boiled over, and he slammed the book shut. I'm stupid. Maria gently laid a hand over his. No, mijo. You're not stupid. You just see the words differently. That night in her tiny servants' quarters, Maria stayed up with pamphlets she'd grabbed from the library, scribbling notes by lamplight. Letter reversals. Skipped words. Exhaustion after reading a single paragraph. The pieces clicked dyslexia. Nobody had seen it, or maybe nobody cared enough to look. The next day, Maria changed her strategy. She covered the page with colored sheets so Caleb could focus line by line. She clapped out syllables like a rhythm. She let him write words in chalk across the garden stones, laughing when he made mistakes instead of scolding him. Slowly, Caleb began to lean in instead of pulling away. For every word he stumbled through, Maria clapped softly. Say it again. His voice was shaky, but his pride grew a little each time. In the hallways, staff whispered, She's wasting her time. That boy will never change. Another snickered, She's just trying to get on the boss's good side. Maria heard them, lips pressed tight. She didn't bother defending herself. She wasn't doing this for Jack Whitmore. She was doing it for Caleb. Weeks turned into a rhythm. After school, Caleb would slip into the library where Maria waited with flashcards, markers, and patience money couldn't buy. She celebrated effort, not perfection. She pointed out road signs when they drove through the city, read recipes while cooking, turned spelling into games. The boy who once hid his notebook under the table now carried it proudly, eager to show what he'd learned. One evening, Maria noticed Jack leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, watching. His face was blank, skeptical, but his gaze lingered longer than usual. He didn't say a word. Progress was slow and messy. There were nights Caleb broke down, pushing books away as tears streamed down his cheeks. I'll never be like the others. Maria knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. You don't have to be like them. You just have to be you. And you, Caleb, are more than enough. She told him stories of men who built empires from failure of her own struggles, raising kids with little money, but an ocean of love. By spring, the results were impossible to ignore. Practice tests came back with grades Caleb had never seen. At school, teachers were stunned when the quiet boy in the back began raising his hand. His writing was still rough letters, sometimes reversed, but he no longer hid the page with his elbow. He wanted to be seen. The mansion itself seemed to shift. The sharpness in Jack's voice softened a little. One evening at dinner, Caleb read the menu aloud without stammering. Jack's fork froze midair. No one else noticed, but for him, it was like watching a miracle unfold. Exam season crept closer, and the entire house felt tense. The night before, Maria found Caleb lying awake, pencils lined neatly like soldiers on his nightstand. She didn't lecture him. She just pulled the blanket tighter. "You've already fought the hardest battle," she whispered. Morning came and Caleb left for the test with a steady nod. Maria stood in the driveway watching him disappear down the road, heart pounding. Days later, the envelope arrived. Jack tore it open with steady hands that trembled just slightly. For a man who had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, this thin piece of paper weighed heavier than gold. His eyes scanned the first line, then stopped. He read it again. First in his class. The room went silent. Caleb blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. Slowly, a smile stretched across his face. Maria's eyes brimmed with tears. Jack's chair scraped back as he stood, footsteps echoing across the marble floor. He stopped in front of his son. For the first time in years, Jack Whitmore knelt and wrapped his arms around Caleb. Gasps came from staff peeking from the hallway. It was rarer than rain in the desert. Jack's voice cracked, rough and unfamiliar. You gave me back my son." Maria shook her head. "He did the work. I just showed him how to see the words." Jack straightened his expression, hardening not with anger, but with resolve. "No, you saw what no one else did. From today, you're not just a maid. You're his tutor, head of staff. Whatever you want, it's yours." Maria stood frozen. Years of scrubbing floors and blending into the wallpaper, and now the man who once mocked her offer was lifting her up in front of everyone. She glanced at Caleb, who looked taller somehow. His shoulders squared, his eyes bright. "Thank you, Miss Maria," he whispered. That simple phrase meant more than any promotion. The Whitmore mansion, once cold and silent, now rang with Caleb's laughter echoing down the hallways. Maria hadn't just taught him to read, she'd given him confidence, dignity, and a father who finally saw him. And she'd proven that sometimes the greatest teachers aren't in classrooms. They're the ones dusting bookshelves, waiting for someone to believe in them. So tell me, what do you think? Would you have given Maria a chance? Or would you have doubted her like everyone else? Have you ever seen kindness change someone's life when money couldn't? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this hit you in the heart, hit like, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories that remind us what really matters.